And they don't get here by paying claims fairly. Even though in the new policy language it states that the appraisal is binding on both parties, we're just going to pay this much. They don't want to lie, so they make it a little bit easier for them to say, they say, okay, well, there's no storm-created damage noted. Well, you're right, you didn't note it, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't there. She's like, well, the marks on the flat roof look exactly like the marks on the main roof. I don't understand why they're not paying. And I explained it to her because it's their money and they want to keep it. Well, Dimitri asked me to come talk to you guys about what's going on in litigation with carriers, specifically with State Farm. And anytime I get an opportunity to say or share my thoughts on State Farm, I take that. Even if I've got to take a late plane to get here. First, I know I'm an attorney. Nobody really likes listening to attorneys because we're attorneys. But I promise you, I keep you guys in mind every day I go to work because I know that y'all are the first ones in the line of defense against these insurance companies. You could call it offense if you want to, but thank you. And I think y'all should give each other a round of applause, pat each other on the backs, because I know that it's not all daisies and it's not perfect weather every day. Dimitri asked me to go over some quick stats and the latest shenanigans that at least State Farm is pulling. So I pulled up some slides, some things that I go over with juries when it comes time to trial. One of the things that I'll spend a few minutes with them is educate them where insurance came from in the first place, was actually from the Merchant Marine back in the 1600s. Well, merchants protecting each other isn't the way it works anymore. These days, we've got lots of companies. They were founded for the sole purpose of making profit. A bunch of they're up here on the screen, but before COVID, they had a combined net premiums of over $330 billion in 2020. When they update this number, I think it's going to be closer to the 400 billions mark. And they don't get here by paying claims fairly. Y'all are all acting shocked like I'm telling you something new. Anyway, here they are. I thought this was interesting because based on revenue, we look at a market share and who's got what. So State Farm, at least for property, is the leader in these United States. And the others kind of take a proportional share. But what I see at the firm, at least since we started tracking on a case management system, is State Farm keeps me the busiest. And I get a lot of stories from you guys about how bad State Farm sucks. I'll agree with every single one of you. And it is kind of amazing some of the different stories that are real. You can't make this stuff up. Sometimes real life is actually more entertaining in a negative way than if you were actually trying to make something up. So State Farm and Allstate pretty much take up the majority of my time at the firm. One of the things I'll do is educate the jurors on what the difference is between retail and buying insurance. With retail, you get an instant satisfaction. You exchange money or run your card, Apple Pay, and you get whatever it is that you're paying for, versus insurance, whereas this depicts, all right, they get your premium up front, you'll get a deck page that sets out some of the basic terms, but you really don't know the value of that insurance policy until later when you actually need to use it, right? So up until that point, it's just a promise, and we all kid ourselves that you're in good hands or whatever, because we all like to think that we make good decisions, and part of those decisions is, okay, well, who did I choose to insure my home? And from a human standpoint, you're rooting for whoever it is that's insuring your home. And I'm sure all of you have gone through this where the insured or your clients don't understand what's going on because it doesn't make any sense. That is, when the storm damage is so obvious and what response they're getting from their carrier it just doesn't make sense. Why are they denying this claim when the damage is so prevalent? And Miss Ladkin, this is a trial that I had last month against State Farm. It was in Fort Worth, but literally it could be anywhere. And we've got an 85-year-old lady, really nice, retired school teacher. She testified that, hey, I was there during the storm. It was really loud. The water started coming in through the roof immediately. We had to put buckets underneath to catch the water. And State Farm came out and basically did a patch job where it got hit. I think there was a minimum of 8 hits per square on some slopes and up to 12 hits per square when they stopped counting on other slopes. The roofer had chalked the whole roof, and basically the State Farm adjuster went over just to where it was tarped underneath where a satellite dish had fallen over. The State Farm adjuster had been at it for, I think, 20 years. He'd done tens of thousands of adjustments. He knew exactly what he was doing. He came up with $20 under the deductible, magically. I'm sure y'all have heard that a couple hundred times. Anyway, before this case ever got to me, it had gone to appraisal. Now, it had gone from a value of somewhere in the $1,800 range. It went to appraisal. The appraisal was just over $20,000. Well, this is one of the things that State Farm has done lately. They're back to, okay, even if there's an appraisal award, we don't agree with that, so we're just going to short pay it. We're going to take off the line items that we don't feel were due to hail and wind, and we're just going to pay what we want. Even though in the new policy language it states that the appraisal is binding on both parties, we're just going to pay this much. So that case found its way to me, and we tried it last month. The jury was really, really good. Now, if you think about it, it doesn't really make sense. Well, okay, they could have paid about 16 grand, and this claim would have been done right from the start. So it doesn't really make financial sense or economic sense for them to fight this. However, it is kind of a low-value claim, and if they take it to a jury trial and somehow get the jury to agree with them, well, what's State Farm going to do after that? Everything's going to go to appraisal, then they're going to short pay the appraisal afterwards. So that's why this particular case was important. And what we found after we basically put the umpire up first, he's the unbiased guy. He got paid the same amount of money from both sides. This happened before it went into litigation. He wasn't being paid for his time for testimony at all. How unbiased can you get? And he basically said, yeah, this is all due to wind and hail, nothing else, and it was binding. So instead of $20,000, the jury awarded her $30,000 for the repair costs, because this was back in, I think, 2019. So she got a little extra for that. But for the bad faith, we're talking well over $125,000 in additional damages, plus my attorney's fees, and they pre-approved an additional 115 grand should State Farm appeal it after that. Thank you. The reason it's important, and they'll take the low dollar ones, and that's why I need to fight the low dollar ones, is because it could set a terrible precedent for all the other ones. And that's why I go out and I do what I do. Now, I told you this adjuster had a lot of experience. When I had him up on the stand, I just asked him, hey, well, here's the tarp. You went straight to this tarp. About how many shingles are under that tarp? And it didn't take him very long to go, it's probably 10 or 12 underneath that tarp. And the next thing I put in front of him was his estimate, where he had only come up with 5 shingles. And even with a jury that doesn't really know the nomenclature or any of the stuff that we deal with every day, they started shaking their head no, like, really? But, that's how you come up with an estimate that's $20 underneath the deductible. They're very calculating in their evilness, if that's a word. For this presentation, it is. Another notable note, on that top line, you could kind of see when engineers or adjusters start skirting the truth, because they don't want to lie, so they make it a little bit easier for them to say, they say, okay, well, there's no storm-created damage noted. Well, you're right, you didn't note it, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't there. Right? Or I think their engineer wanted to talk about some sporadic anomalies. I call them hail hits. Here's a big black dot. All the granules are gone. It's circular enough. And there's hundreds of them on this roof. What the hell else it is? An anomaly is something that's different, different from the norm. And you're saying that these hundreds and hundreds of anomalies on the roof? Okay, and he did it with a straight face, but the jury didn't buy it. All right, what do we got next? So after that, they cherry-picked what they wanted. They basically excluded the entire roof from the appraisal award, cut a check for $24.31, and Alice said, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to accept that. And she basically said, no, you're going to pay the full award or I'm going to go to litigation. And that's exactly what happened. Other ones from last year, I believe Dimitri and I spoke to this one at some point last year. Both again with State Farm, another old lady, Miss Veach. I believe they didn't think that she ever got on her roof. But one of the things that she mentioned to me was, Chad, hey, look, I get up there every quarter probably with my blower, and I blow all the leaves and the needles off of it. And what she didn't understand was, hey, on the flat part of my roof, I've got those marks. And, oh, by the way, the hail that hit her house was in the 1 3/4 to 2.5 inch range. So we're not talking small. They were pretty big. She's like, well, the marks on the flat roof look exactly like the marks on the main roof. I don't understand why they're not paying. And I explained it to her because it's their money and they want to keep it. So that was another trial that had to take place, and basically it was the same result, pretty low dollar claim. However, if they got away with it, then it just makes the monster meaner in the future. 2 months after that one, we had Mr. Aaron Puckett, very similar. The damage wasn't all that great, but they flat out denied it because they thought they could. On both of those, the return was a little over $180,000 each on something that really could have been paid up front for not a lot of money. Another one that Dimitri and I had talked about, Hinojos v. State Farm. That was another appraisal case that came out of El Paso. This is the one that I had taken to the Texas Supreme Court. after we were thrown out of the trial court after State Farm had short paid the appraisal award probably 2.5 years after the date of loss. So basically, what they were trying to do, they didn't like the way that litigation was going, so they invoked appraisal and then paid the ACV minus the deductible, shot a couple birds at us, and filed to get out of the case, and the judge granted it. Well, we said, there's no way that this is right or fair, so we fought it. We went to the appeals court, they sided with the trial court, so we took it to the Supreme Court, and we won. What's important about that is if we hadn't have been successful, I think at least the playing field in Texas would be a completely different landscape, and our insurance policies would be worth a hell of a lot less than they even are now. I think they had denied this roof and paid one room on the interior. A public adjuster got involved, and she was a barker, she was mean, and she got them to increase the interior scope by a couple of rooms, but it was still only a couple of grand, and the estimate that State Farm was coming up with never attacked the actual problem, which was the roof. Now, a lot of the roofs out in El Paso are flat. This was a single-story flat roof, a single-story house with a flat roof. They have a lot of water coolers up on top. Well, our clients had testified that the water had started coming in during the storm. State Farm said it didn't hail at your house. However, another Alice, no relation to the other, they had photos of the hail. They had video of the hail hitting their house, and they're still getting these letters from State Farm stating there's no indications of hail. Anyway, State Farm treated this as if it was an accidental discharge claim in order to basically disregard the roof in its entirety, which made no sense because usually you have to have some sort of plumbing that would burst above the areas that got damaged, and in this flat roof house, there was no attic. There's no plumbing above the areas that got wet. So, yes, a lot of times the hardest things to explain to our clients is things that make no sense that the insurance companies are doing. State Farm is one of the worst. Anyway, the appraisal award was 39 grand. At the end of the day, by the time it went to the Supreme Court and back, they were on the hook for more than 350 in an argument that they lost. Now, that's just the cost on our side. That doesn't even include the litigation costs that they had to defend all of these cases, which for the three that we just went over, I would put it at over 150,000 each. Dimitri asked me to talk about stats. One of the things that I've seen lately is if the insured has a birth date that's beyond a certain year, what I've seen, at least on my side, is they have a tendency to be taken advantage of more so than others. You know, our elders, the ones who call themselves part of the greatest generation, it's a terrible thing. I think the data actually supports that. There is no reason on God's green earth that Miss Ladkin or Miss Veach's claims shouldn't have been paid. Okay, one thing that made State Farm mad when we were litigating, on Miss Ladkin's house, the contractor did a really, really good job of chalking up all the damage. I don't know where they got the chalk, but it was thick, it was bright, and you could not miss all of the hail hits that they had marked up. What was interesting, when got up to tell their side of the story, they got this extremely experienced adjuster to basically say, oh, my scope came from Miss Ladkin's contractor. Well, where do you come up with that? It's in the claim notes. I remember putting a claim file note in around that time, and it's basically a self-serving note in there like, oh, like contractor agreed. Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. You know, these guys are busting it every day, and of course they're going to take a couple hours out of their day to come walk a roof with you and agree that there's no damage, because that makes sense. Everybody likes wasting their time, right? But this is the kind of stuff that I hear from an attorney's side. I'm like, there's no way a contractor would agree, especially with the amount of damage that's visible in all these photographs. So watch the notes. One thing I ask everybody is they're going to write their own log notes. If you don't have a system already in place to note the file, whether it's from the office or out in the field, make sure you write up-to-date notes. And it could be as simple as, hey, we've got an inspection. The adjuster showed up at 9:55 and got out of his truck at 10:45 to start the inspection. And he didn't get on the roof, or he didn't go in the back. He walked around. It was apparent that he wasn't actually looking, or she wasn't looking for damage, said a few words to the property owner, and then took off. And then they go back and they pad the crap out of their log notes and just put up a bunch of bull crap, and then it comes back out in trial. Well, this guy testifies that, oh, well, I got this abbreviated scope from the contractor. And I said, really? Okay. Well, did you ask the contractor to verify what you were writing in your own claim notes? And he looked at me like he was very confused, which he should have, because why would he do that? Only for the contractor to disagree, right? So we went on to that. I said, well, you said that's the only thing that the contractor pointed out was the interior plus underneath where the satellite dish was completely ripped off of the roof. What about all the hail marks? They chalked all that. They spent some time to make it easy for you. Oh, well, I just disagreed with them. Oh, okay. Well, your note isn't exactly true either, is it? He didn't agree with me, but they rarely do. Now, I had, and it doesn't matter how simple your notes are. I just say that because if you have some sort of system, it's a lot easier to go back and thumb through it while it's fresh on your memory. You know, write it down. That way, a year, 2 years later, it's not a he said, she said, well, this is what I recall what was being said. It's much, much better if it's written down. And back to what I kind of said at the beginning, I feel for you. When I interview prospective jurors for trials, we talk about property claims and how they went, and it's pretty consistent. Anything that was 15 years or older, it seems as though the property claim process was pretty effortless. Storm comes, property gets damaged, they call the insurer, somebody comes out, it gets fixed, everybody moves on with their life, not a big deal. The closer to today's date, the worse those stories that the prospective jurors share get. And that's when the unbelievable stories actually start getting said. It's before the trial even starts. And I use them to basically educate the rest of the jury who might not have those bad experiences. Somebody in a pool of 40 has a bad experience already. And it's just getting worse, unfortunately. So Chris had me go and talk to a group of roofers that are close to our main office. There's probably 25 of them, and they looked beaten when I got there. They're just not happy, and it seemed like they were just beating a wall, and they were kind of downtrodden about it because they cared. And they're like, we're not getting anywhere with the insurers. It's like, well, y'all do what you do, get it if the line has been drawn in the sand, the likelihood that you can bust through it, the insurance companies very, very rarely change their mind. Even how ridiculous some of their positions are, they rarely change their mind. So just say, hey, we're going to get you some more help, enlist an adjuster, enlist an attorney, and let's help those people out. Just don't get frustrated in a very frustrating environment. Keep your heads up. Thank you. God bless you. I'm available for questions. I think that's all my time.
Give it up.
And I'm glad I made it.
Give it up for Chad Wilson.